Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Webinar Talk Show. My name is Tom Singer.
And I'm Liz Green, and today we're going to do a little something different. One of the things that is interesting about the National Speakers Association is sometimes you become really good friends with people who might be considered your competition. And it is one of the wonderful things about our organization. But it's great because we get to learn from each other. So this is going to be a fun conversation, don't you think, Tom?
I do, because Eliz and I both for years have worked as Masters of Ceremonies in addition to being keynote speakers. And in fact, 6 years ago, we started this whole idea of the conference talk show, which has now grown into the webinar talk show, because we believe oftentimes when you have facilitated discussions, it's way better than a talking head over PowerPoint.
Indeed.
And I think there's a lot of people as we've moved into this world of virtual who are still on the fence about, do we even need an MC for this virtual event? And I don't know about you, Eliz, but I think they need facilitators, hosts, and MCs more in the virtual world.
Well, only if they want their participants to actually feel engaged. If you don't care about that, then, whatever, PowerPoint with some talking heads, that's fine if you don't want your people to actually learn anything or enjoy the experience. But if you want that, I do think it's important to have somebody who is acting as the eyes and ears and voice of your participants.
And while Eliz and I have done this many, many times, we have a friend named John Petz. And John is one of the most accomplished masters of ceremonies who's out there. And he has a really eclectic background. John was a professional magician, as addition to being like a professional in the technology marketing world. I also think, if I'm not wrong, he's a member of the Magic Castle. And if that's true, I'm going to have to go to Los Angeles with him sometime because my bucket list includes wanting to go there. But John hosts live events and now virtual events to make sure that people are more engaged, that there's a sense of energy and continuity throughout a conference. And I thought it would be fun if we brought him on here and Eliz and I could just talk about why we all believe Masters of Ceremonies can make the difference for a live in-person event, for a hybrid event, or for a virtual conference. So welcome to the Webinar Talk Show, John Petz.
Yay, thank you. You know how to applaud. Isn't that so great when you see people on the screens going,
yeah, well, and, talking about including your participants, our participants who may be deaf or hard of hearing, this is something that we should have been doing for a long time.
No, I agree. Actually, it's actually when there's an interpreter on stage, I'm sure you've done this as well. And I know my basic, you go to them and you do your thank yous and you applaud. I think it's neat that we can all learn some of those things that we maybe never would have learned before.
Absolutely.
So John, do me a favor and give us a little bit more about your background, going back to your early days as a magician and working as a tech marketer and how you became a speaker and MC.
We'll do the shortest version that I can for you. And I'll even start with the tech version because, virtual meetings have been going on for a very, very long time. However, they're new to many people. My first job was desktop video conferencing. This is I won't give you the year because I'll date myself. Let's say the 90s. It was in the 90s.
Somewhere in there.
But I was with the company they invented packetized video on IP infrastructure. So your LANs and your WANs. This is the company that eventually, after 17 different acquisitions, became Skype. And if I would have stayed through all that, I wouldn't be here. I'd be in Aruba right now. But I'm excited to be here. So tech sales and marketing started off literally in the video conferencing, desktop video conferencing, online meeting collaboration space, just coincidental. And you mentioned the magician background. Doing magic as a kid, 7 years old, got a magic kit, through high school, did birthday parties. And when I got my first real job, and this was going on, I started performing again and did a lot of sleight of hands from restaurants to corporate clients to cocktail parties, performed full-time for a while, went around the world as a magician and illusionist, jumped back into the .com kind of tech sales and marketing world, had a great, successful sales career, and found myself just still drawn to the performing world. I was doing so much sales training and sales inspiration, and I mix that with some entertainment. And, now you call it a motivational performer, call it a inspiration, it's inspiration, it's entertainment, it's education is what I provide my clients. And now a lot of virtual MC as well.
So you have this very eclectic,
True.
bag of experience, which is great. How did you start doing the MC part?
Started with a charity I do a lot with still today. They're called the A Kid Again organization, and was invited, went to, their annual charity gala. It's a sit down, it's a live auction, it's a silent auction. If you've been, they're very much the same. And the show itself, and no offense to them, but it was just, there was no emotional connection. There wasn't the flow, the calls to action in the right spot. And I'm like, I made maybe the error of suggesting, listen, you could make this so much better. I'm like, you want to help us? I'm like, yes, I do. And I helped them produce the next show. So it was more than simply, I emceed it. I helped produce it right. The dynamics of the show, like when to do calls to action, when to put in media content, different speakers. From that, I had another organization who was there who saw me. Would you host our charity gala? Would you do our charity? I started helping charity galas, which then a lot of corporate association kind of clientele at that, which launched into some corporate work. And it started off as, if you look at a keynote / MC buckets, keynote was, 85% of my work, and then 15 was little MC and just straight entertainment for companies want entertainment. And with the changes and what's happened, not even just so much the changes, MC just continue to repeat, and they call you back year after year. And it's like you're the face, you're the brand of the event. So MC has continued to grow in my expanse of percentage of programs that I do and events I do overall. And it's something I wouldn't have traded for anything. I love it. It's an incredible amount of work, but it's such a critical and important factor.
Yeah, I can agree, because I started doing the MC part after I was doing the keynote part. But I find that I really like being engaged and being able to be that sort of thread that runs through the event. Because when it's done right, that you impacted the event. Where sometimes if you're the keynote speaker, you don't know what happened the rest of the time you were there.
Right.
You speak and say thank you, and you're on a plane, and the event goes on for 4 more days. So I do definitely like that. But you've seen a lot because you've been doing this for a long time. As we've made this transition to virtual, Eliz and I said in the introduction that we think it's more important to have an MC today. What do you think?
They're important in both facets, but yes, if someone is truly doing a conference, a multi-day, a full day, you have to have that element, that continuity of story, of theme, of content, and even personality and expertise to help it flow. And I think it's an overlooked component. I think sometimes people think after, what if we got an MC? I'm like, you need to start potentially with that, not without thinking of your conference theme, of course, but it is a key role that really will influence the outcomes of your program.
And I'm sure that you find yourself like Eliz and I do, when you're in that role and they bring you in early enough, you actually become part of the meeting planner team, even if you're not necessarily being paid for that, because you've seen hundreds and hundreds of events where maybe those planners have only seen that event year after year. So you can bring so many fresh ideas, right?
True. And I found myself in many literally as the co-producer. And sometimes getting paid for that, sometimes not, but adding that value, because people, like I said, we've been doing it a long time, but it might be their very first time they've done this. And they need hand-holding. They need someone who, we're the insurance policy for them. If something goes wrong, we are instantly there, jumping back into the screen, taking that to the next segment, and they may have not anticipated that. So those are elements that, but yes, to answer your question, I'll just leave it at that. Yes.
Well, I had that conversation the other day about that insurance policy, that having that MC in this virtual environment, if someone loses their internet in their neighborhood and they're supposed to be your keynote speaker, there's nothing they can do. They vanish. The MC has to be ready during that whole day or 3 days for any technology problem to be able to jump in. Whereas when you're at a live event, and you're right, it's important no matter what, but when you're at a live event, I've never had a keynote speaker vanish on stage. So
no, I've had them not show up,
but not in the middle of a speech.
No, that would be a problem, really.
I think that's kind of funny. I've never had one vanish on stage. I've
well,
made someone vanish.
Maybe not
I've
have
done
had
that.
Right. But actually, I think you have vanished on stage.
I have. But it was planned. There was a next person right there. No, that's you're right, Tom. I mean, if internet goes out, it's out. And the real question, I'm sure you've been here too, and you have those people that would say, yeah, but you're only doing 5 minutes here and 10 minutes. And I'm like, no, listen, I listen to every speaker. every segment, because at any time I have to immediately be involved and know what's going on and be able to speak relevant at that exact moment. People don't realize that.
One of the reasons I love doing this work, and I certainly have done more in the hybrid arena, is that sometimes I'm the only person who's paying attention to that, whether it's a hybrid event and it's my job to pay attention to those people who are watching from home and ask the questions that need to be asked. Or maybe everybody could see what the speaker was doing, but the camera just didn't happen to be on them at the right time. And they're like, what happened? So that's my role in that situation. Have you had a lot of pushback on that, but you're only on camera for 3 minutes in between each thing? Have you had a lot of pushback, or do you find that when you explain it, people understand?
I've had pushback in both a hybrid / virtual as well as a live event. Certainly, if they haven't worked with someone like me or the two of you before, and after the fact, it's a moot point completely, because they get it. They see how much true effort goes into it. But explaining to them, and I have a list of things like, this is what happens behind the scenes. This is what happens on site. This was what happened 6 months that the calls were on, and helping, other people script. And in this realm, it's even working with their presenters, making sure their lights, their camera, because no one else may really ever do that. And you want consistent quality. So yes, pushback, but educating them and helping them be successful, especially in front of their boss and their people. We've got to play that role. We have to, whether we're paid for it or not.
And you bring up a really
hard to say, but
you bring up an interesting you bring up a really interesting point in the fact that after they've worked with you, they realize why it's so important. And many organizations will use the same MC for many years. Some will try to shake it up every couple of years just to have fresh, a fresh face. But like, I have one association who I ended up as their MC, I would say by accident. They wanted me to do another role and couldn't really afford me. So we sort of pieced together what I could do to bring the value to the right level. I've now been the MC for that event for 4 years because they were like, wow. And we've, are kind of reaching the fact where it's not the Tom show. So they're looking to bring someone else in next time, which is totally understandable. And I'm going to help them find the right person. But the funniest part of that whole thing is now they would never not have an MC for this large event once they've worked with somebody, like you or me or Eliz.
Yeah, once you have it, you don't go back.
It's true.
As long as they have a good experience, right?
Right. Well, and that's part of our responsibility too, is that they have a bad MC or an MC that should just sort of, checks the box, like, oh, I'm here to introduce the next speaker. Well, that's not really your whole job. It's like having a mediocre professional speaker. It does not help the whole profession. What do you think makes people, meeting planners, hesitant, other than having a bad experience in the past?
Well, that's a
Tom
great
can answer this
strategy.
too.
Yeah, no, that'd be good. We can both chime in. What makes a meeting planner hesitant? I think hesitant being, some people would think it's show up, tell a joke, introduce a person. And that then becomes a commodity, and get the local weatherman, or to have a professional speaker be able to introduce that speaker. In my case, add some entertainment that tells a story to get people engaged and laughing about some of the content that's a foreshadow to what will happen. And then on the outro, the end of the program, wrapping that back of why it's important to that theme, to that business element, and then transitioning into the next one. Hesitant because they don't understand that role potentially, or how important it can be. Hesitant that will go blue. Sometimes people think the comedy side, is it going to be political? Is it going to be, inappropriate?
Yeah.
Hesitant that they think it's, I won't talk. They think it's only X dollars a day because it's only 10 minutes, and they don't realize the exponential amount of hours that go in. So I guess those would be the top three. But you and Tom, you can come back and too. We can share every single reason why those shouldn't be a concern.
Right. I think the number one reason I run into is people say, well, it's expensive to have an MC for this event. and they make the decision to save money, and they say, we'll just have our board president do it, or our head of sales has a great personality. And the problem with that is twofold. One is that board president or your director of sales, they have other responsibilities at that conference. And when any one of us serve as an MC, we're on the whole time. Like, I go to all the cocktail breaks. I come, even if there's not a general session, I come downstairs for the afternoon cookie break because I'm the host of that show. And you wouldn't invite somebody to your house for a party and then go to your room and watch Netflix.
Most of us would not know.
But the director of sales, during that break, a customer could have a problem. He has to put on his director of sales hat, and he's not thinking about, wow, is it time to get everybody back into the ballroom, or watching for something interesting that happens during, the dinner party that he can then take back on stage the next morning. So I think that if it's, I want to save money, that isn't necessarily thinking of the audience's best, outcome. So I think money is usually the number one pushback. The other thing is, when you hire a good MC, that person typically is going to have a big personality. You want somebody with energy. You want somebody who brings that oomph. The problem is that can be scary, because if that person's energy doesn't resonate with your audience, they're there for 4 days, and, you're dealing with, sort of an onstage to audience or virtually transmitted relationship. And if that relationship, if they don't gel well, it's going to be a weight through the whole conference. And I think people are either scared of that or they've experienced that in the past.
I also think that because we all go to all kinds of different events, if a client has a problem and tells us what the problem is, we can usually come up with a solution they never would have thought of. For example, in our association, the fancy gala night, and we all refer to it as prom. So we all get dressed up and we have a big dinner, and it's our awards night.
It's the speaker awards ceremony, but we do treat it like a prom. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a big night. We all gather outside the big ballroom. The doors open. And in the last few years, that has been something that the staff has feared, because it's sort of this stampede, and people are not always nice trying to get to a good table, because it's very complicated to have, table numbers and seating, because we are very special kittens when it comes to registering things. So that was presented as, here's a problem. The solution was to give people expectations of how we were all going to behave when we came into the ballroom. And, I did it in a sort of funny way that was just sort of, like, here's what we're going to do. And it solved the problem, because I'm a Girl Scout leader and I know how to tell people how to behave.
Well, and that's one of the advantages that a master of ceremonies can do is they can handle some of those tough conversations with the crowd from the stage that the board president can't do, because there's politics involved. I was at a conference one time and they were doing a game online. They had a gamification where the more times you posted, you got points. If you visited vendors, you got points. And there were 3,000 people at this event. And honestly, about 50 people were playing the game. It really was not a success, but we had to pretend it was a success every day. And so there'd be a leaderboard, and I helped them do it. Instead of showing there were only 50 people, let's just show who the 5 leaders are. I helped them through that. But the last morning, and by the way, the prize was like a $4,000 computer.
Whoa.
And the last morning, and it was a tech conference, one of the people had stayed up all night and wrote a piece of code that allowed him to post things every 9 seconds. So when we woke up in the morning, most people who were competitive had like 550 points. He had 50,000 points.
Whoa.
And they freaked out because he gamed the system, but they didn't want to give him the prize, but they hadn't written in a rule for not writing code. So as the MC, I just said, do you want me to deal with it? And they were really scared it was going to become a political issue. And I went up on stage. It was the last day. They knew my personality. They were all technologists. I said, look, you guys know I'm a marketing person in my background. You guys are technologists. At a marketing conference, people stay in the bar all night. At a tech conference, clearly some people go back and write code. And I told the story and we showed the leaderboard. And then we had built a slide where he disappeared from the leaderboard. and I made him a folk hero for doing what he did, but made it clear that he couldn't win the prize because that wasn't fair. And he was happy because he got attention. He never asked for the prize. He didn't, I think, expect to get it. But everybody cheered and laughed. And afterwards, they're like, have you dealt with that problem like that before? That was wonderful. Well, no, I haven't. But I've dealt with other problems. And I knew what that audience needed because I'd been to hundreds of events.
I was going to ask. It's fascinating. Did you actually share his name, which evidently you did, which was neat. And take your vice president of sales. Could they have handled that in the same way without being like that weird relationship afterward at that point? Right.
Yeah,
right.
Probably not.
It does the experience, the multiple different kinds of experience, different kinds of events, whether it's virtual or hybrid or in person, makes a difference. If you were thinking about what's the one guarantee you could give an event professional, if they hired you as the MC, what's the one thing you could guarantee was going to happen?
Me personally, increased engagement and connection to why they're truly there. Guarantee it. And how I would do that would be the other part of the story, but undoubtedly I could increase the engagement and connection to the purpose of that event. And
ultimately, they want people to come back next year. They want them to leave happy, be like, yes, of course I'm coming next year, because that's what drives the bus.
Well, sure. Especially, the corporate market versus association market. Corporate, they are told to come or they're invited to come. And association, You're right. This is membership and revenue for your association, and having people feeling a part of that, participating, interacting, engaging, and walking away with that sense of, that was awesome. And they're going to tell their friends about it, and they're going to bring their, that's what they need. That's what they want.
So John, as the world went crazy and events stopped back in March, you, like so many of our speaker and MC friends, you had to sort of jump into this virtual MC role. And I know you've done it before, but you had to jump in with both feet. So what are some of the things you did to prepare? I know that you kind of built a studio in your house. What are some of the things that professional MCs like yourself and us have done to be ready for this new world?
I think, yes, the studio set up, some screens, and I've got a couple different scenes. I have a bar scene over that way, which is more entertainment based. This is kind of the interview scene. And then I've got another scene. So I built an eclectic mix of looks that someone we could test out and see what was right for their conference, because the bar, some people call this Mr. Rogers' neighborhood. They're waiting Mr. Rogers to come walking through that door behind me. Maybe it's not for them. So one, building something that could be used in multiple ways. Myself as an entertainer as well, adapting what is an interactive experience in a live event to call it a card trick, whatever you might, different camera angles, and readapting stories and entertainment so people on a virtual screen can still interact and still literally be involved in the show and in the experience. That's an incredibly huge and difficult piece, but I adapted that. And then even adapted, I would say, the third, on how I help people through the process. You help people through the live event process differently, connecting with people early to let them know that, listen, we can do this together. I've done it many times. I believe in you and I can help you get there. So giving people confidence and comfort, knowing that this can be successful in this type of environment.
Well, and isn't that what we all want? We want to be comfortable and confident that we're going to be successful. That's a good thing.
So John, as we sort of wrap this interview up, if someone was watching this and they were sort of on the line, they have the budget, but they don't want to spend it. They have never done virtual before and it scares them. What would you tell them as to why they should hire someone like you, someone like Eliz and I? Why should they make that investment and partnership with the right host, facilitator, master of ceremonies?
Well, I'll take it back to engagement and connection. We want people to, back to a comment, Tom, you said earlier, if you get someone for free and it doesn't work, they don't connect, they don't tell it, you still paid too much at free, right? Because you lost that opportunity that you'll never have again. So when looking at a professional MC, you need to, well, why should they? I guess this was your question, correct? You want to be successful overall in this conference, and look at it, if it's each different day as a chapter in a story. You want someone who can help you tell that story, who ideally potentially is not your own person, because that person can't edify themselves. They can't say how great they am. We can do that, and we can help them through the process of understanding the content elements, how to use those as building blocks as a conference, how to create the right emotion, the right dynamic flow, and be not only an MC, but a professional speaker that brings content, that brings relevance, that brings entertainment, that brings engagement, that brings the networking, that brings the insurance policy, as I call it, to ensure your event is absolutely sensational. Looking at myself personally, I don't think, literally, Tom and Liz, I love you both, and you're fabulously talented, and whoever's looking at this should also consider them, and I'd be thrilled if you hired them. I don't think there's anyone else in the world who has the level of experience I have in this space based on my history. I don't think anyone can bring the entertainment and bring content and relevance and has that and produced multiple online events at this point in time, truly produced them. So when someone's looking at if they want a full level of professionalism and experience, it's coincidental and crazy that I ended up here right now in that space, but that's what happened.
That's where you are.
That's right. Well, and that's why we wanted to bring you on the show, because you have seen so much and you do have that extra piece of being that entertainer, which brings a different angle to it. And that's one of the things I tell everybody is when you're looking to hire an MC, this is not a commodity. There are people who have a background in entertainment. There are people who have a background in business. There are those people who have a background being a newscaster, but you probably want them to have more experience on a live stage than just being a newscaster. But there's people who come at it from so many different ways. Not any one of us are the right person for every single event. And so I think that that's the message that I want to get across from this discussion is you have a lot of opportunities out there. Make sure that you're not just shopping on price or checking a box, because you need to find that person who's going to engage your people and be able to do exactly what John said. And that is get them to come back next time.
Love how you said it.
All right. Last thoughts, John?
Last thoughts?
Yes.
I wish everyone hope for what's coming next. I wish them happiness at home and balance in their life. And I wish them safety and make good choices. Like I tell my kids, make good choices.
Make good choices. I used to say that all the time. Now they're in college. It's weird. Still should make good choices, though.
That's right. That's right. Well, John, thank you so much for joining us here on the Webinar Talk Show, where Eliz and I really believe that where Eliz and I really believe that webinars can be entertainment, and they don't have to be just a talking head over PowerPoint. If you want people to learn, sitting down and having a conversation with really smart people like John Petz is a great way to do that.
John, if somebody wanted to get a hold of you because they think you're awesome and you'd be perfect MC, where would they find you?
JohnPetz.com. I'm an easy Google.
Just like it's spelled down there.
Yeah, JONPETZ.com.
Perfect.
Yep.
And you can find us at webinartalkshow.com or follow us on Facebook at Webinar Talk Show. We'll be back next week with more wonderful guests. It's going to be hard to top John, but we're going to try. We will see you then. Again, thanks for joining us, John. Everybody have a great weekend.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.